any hesitation about that, so thank you. We have our meeting minutes available now, draft meeting minutes, and are there any questions about those? Does a member have a motion to approve?
Madam Chair, if I may, here we go. I did catch one thing, was it in, yes, in these minutes. On page 6 of the minutes, it's in the long the long record of item 3. There's a middle paragraph right there. And it states that Commissioner McAdams stated the idea on the model ordinance to see how many people are using it and see if we can provide better direction to local jurisdictions. He also said we are examining the issue of conflicting jurisdictions, conflicting programs and requirements facing developers, and that we will draft a letter to the non-compliant local governments and give them less than a gentle nudge to start communicating this. First of all, I want to report that I have not had an opportunity to draft such letters, but I have to question if someone else, maybe Ms. Diarconte, was the speaker of those points.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I can address that.
Yes.
Yes. Commissioner McAdams, we took that as a requirement for us to do, and we were prepared to, but we did. Everybody has complied and sent in at least a draft stormwater plan now. So we did not have to draft a letter or make any kind of recommendation. They comply. We did have a couple phone calls, but the dialogue with, I believe, Tarboro got going very well, and they have a plan submitted now.
Okay. Well, thank you. Some of this is in the first person, he, referring to me. He also said we are examining the issue of conflicting programs and requirements and that we will draft a letter.
Thank you. Yes.
I don't think I'm the one that did either of those things.
It should not have been in first person.
Okay.
You're right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How about that instead of we will, it can say the division will draft a letter.
Okay.
How about that?
Thank
Thank you for pointing that out. I try and catch things like that, but I missed it. Any other revisions?
Madam Chair, I move approval,
Thank you. Do I have a second?
subject to that adjustment.
Yes, thank you. Second from Vice Chair Harris. Thank you. Any other comments or discussions? If none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I've noticed that recently we've been asking for a show of hands. Do we need to do that? Okay, well, all in favor, please raise your hand. Commissioner Bailey, you are not a member, are you?
No.
Okay. We do have a quorum, right? We do. Okay. All right. Thank you. Very good. So for the record, there were no objections or dissents to the vote. So the motion passes. Thank you. Okay. Moving on. Our first action item is a request approval to proceed to the EMC with the 2020-2022 Biennial Report on the progress in developing and implementing Basin-Wide water resources management plans to the Environmental Review Commission. Presenting is Michelle Raquet with the Division of Water Resources Basin Planning Branch. Welcome.
Thank you. So good afternoon. I'm glad to be here today to present our biennial report to the Environmental Review Commission. Many of these slides will look very familiar to you. Last year I presented this report as an annual report, but we did have changes to our statute that allowed us to go from annual to biennial. So we're going to review those changes real quick and then get into the report itself. So as mentioned, just a quick outline, we'll review the changes that were made to statute in 2021. We'll provide an overview and progress made in developing and implementing our basin plans. The report also includes an update on hydrologic models, and then we'll have a quick conclusion. So Session Law 2021-158, Section 8, revised our basin-wide water resources management plan statute. Some of those revisions, some of the highlights are listed here. One of those was that the title actually changed from basin-wide water quality management plans to basin-wide water resources management plans. And that's because we are now putting these basin plans as an integrated approach to include water quality and water quantity. We revised and clarified some language of what to be included in the basin plan. There was some language in there that was very ambiguous, and just didn't provide us good guidance as to what to include in the plan. There's a statement that's added in there that the plan shall include information about surface and groundwater resources to the extent known by the department. Again, that integrated approach to quality and quantity. It changed our reporting requirements from annually to biennially. And then it also defined the 17 major river basins based on the USGS cataloging units. So per this report and per statute, what is required in this report? From a basin-wide water resources management perspective, this report is required to report on the progress in developing and implementing our basin-wide plans, our basin plans. It is to include a statement or state information about our public involvement and engagement that we did in the development and implementation of those basin plans. And we're to include a statement about water quality and quantity conditions in this report. And then also as part of this, for statute 143-355P, we are also to report on the progress in developing basin-wide hydrologic models. So this report covers the time period of July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2022. And so this report covers the Chowan, Pasquotank, White Oak, Yadkin PD, and we also have the Cape Fear Basin in here as well. So each of these slides are pretty much laid out the same, and the report is laid out this way as well, where we have a description of each of the basin plans, the plan development piece of it, the public involvement piece, and then what we included in the report as part of the water quality and quantity statements. And so for the Chowan, the EMC approved the fourth update to the Chowan Basin Plan in March of 2021. We focused on the need for additional monitoring and data collection to identify pollutions that are contributing to recurring algal blooms in that basin. For the public involvement piece, we did a lot of phone, virtual meetings, emails. We were restricted on the public engagement piece due to health restrictions or health guidance related to the pandemic. And as part of the conclusion for that river basin plan, it included information about increases in organic nitrogen, turbidity, bacteria, dissolved oxygen, chlorophyll A, biological impairments all continue to be a concern in that basin. And for the water quantity piece, working with our water supply planning branch, we were able to include information about water use in the basin. And they were able to determine that current projected water use through 2060 is expected to be met. Our Pasquotank River Basin Plan was approved by the EMC in September of 2021. Much like the Chowan, it focused on the need for additional monitoring and data collection to help identify pollution sources, particularly in the Perquimans and Little Rivers and the Albemarle Sound itself. Like the Chowan, we also did a lot of public outreach through phones and virtual meetings and emails, and a story map. This should actually say a story map was created. We do have a story map available for the Pasquotank Basin Plan to help with that engagement piece. Nutrients, copper, pH, dissolved oxygen, dioxin, bacteria were all parameters of concern that were identified. And like the Chowan, current projected water use is expected to be met through 2060. But we also added a statement in the Pasquotank related to seasonal use, water use, and just noting that there is an influx of visitors during particular times of the year where those water systems could be taxed and trying to meet that water demand. The White Oak River Basin Plan was approved by the EMC in November of 2021. This plan focused a lot on the shellfish growing areas and trying to identify strategies to reduce impacts from point and non-point sources of pollutions to those shellfish growing areas. We were able to do phone and virtual meetings and emails, and our hope is that eventually down the road, we'll also develop a story map for this basin plan as well. Turbidity, fecal coliform, enterococci bacteria, and copper were identified as parameters of concern in white oak. And there's been persistent water quality problems related to nutrients, chlorophyll A, and algal blooms. And those bacteria levels in particular are impacting the shellfish growing areas. So as part of the recommendations in the white oak plan, we actually worked with APNEP and the Coastal Enhancement Protection Plan. And so a lot of the recommendations in this plan match up with the CHIP, the 2016 CHIP, and we also referenced the 2021 amendment, which was actually presented the same time that this basin plan was presented to you all. Current projected water use demands are expected to be met through 2060. This plan also included information not only what is reported to our water supply planning branch, but also to our coastal coastal capacity
Coastal Plain Capacity Use
Thank
Plan.
you. I'm not looking at my notes, and I wanted to say the acronym, and I was trying to avoid the acronym, so thank you. So we included those programs in the Pasco Tank plan as well. And again, with this basin, as with the Pasco Tank, we noted that there is an influx of people that come into the basin at certain parts of the year, which could tax those water systems. Our most recent basin plan that was presented to the Water Quality Committee was just last month in May of 2022, and that was the DEAC and PD. We focused on data needs to identify point and non-point sources of pollution, really focusing on High Rock Lake and the Rocky River. With High Rock Lake, there have been nutrient chlorophyll A persistent problems. In the Rocky River, there's a lot of development that's happening and a lot of point source, indicating that a lot of point source is contributing to nutrient issues in that basin. For public involvement, restrictions started to be lifted a little bit, so we were able to do a few in-person meetings or participate in a few meetings. Our basin planner, Jenny Baker, who is the lead for this basin plan, attended several coalition meetings and basin association meetings over the last 2 years. And for the statements related to water quality and quantity, we identified the parameters of concern: turbidity, fecal coliform, nutrients, pH. We had noted that there's persistent water quality problems for nutrients from both point and non-point sources of pollution. And we noted the water use in the basin. And we also have a table in that basin plan that lists the 4 IBT certificates that have been issued. We included the Cape Fear River Basin plan in this report this year because we are currently in the development phase for this plan. We are working on the 4th update to this. As with the other basin plans, we'll be focusing on the chemical, physical, and biological impairments and the need for more assessment to really understand the sources from point and non-point sources. We'll be mentioning and we'll be making note of emerging compounds within this basin plan, but we're really going to be referring people and pointing the reader towards DEQ's emerging compounds web pages for the most recent data and the most recent strategy plans and actions that are being put in place related to those emerging compounds. We have been actively engaged with stakeholder outreach. We currently have a stakeholder engagement survey that has been distributed throughout the basin. As of today, we have 127 responses to that survey. So questions that we have on there related to: what are your priority concerns in the basins? What do you think the challenges are? What do you think some of the solutions are for trying to protect water within this basin? We did this survey in conjunction with the Cape Fear River Assembly and with the help of an intern we had this summer. So it's a little bit of a new endeavor for us as part of our stakeholder engagement piece, but we're really excited about the results we've seen so far and the positive feedback we've gotten from it. For the water quality and quantity pieces, we'll be looking at all those parameters that are listed there. We'll be looking at any persistent nutrient issues that are in the basin. And we're working with our water supply planning branch, as well as our groundwater management sections, to look at the water use and report on that in the basin as well. You often see every 2 years a report on the integrated report and the 303D list. Working with our modeling and assessment branch, we included in the report an update on the 2022 303D listing. which was approved in April of 2022. Nearly half of the North Carolina's waters are impaired for shellfish growing areas, and you can see how we kind of group those parameters, and they are listed by the number of assessment units. And all waters continue to be impaired for mercury and fish tissue. For the hydrologic models, we have hydrologic models for 11 of our 17 river basins. We have combined models for the Yadkin and Lumber that was just finished in early 2022. And we have combined models for the New and Watauga, as well as the Cape Fear and the Neuse. In June of 2022, DEQ was able to secure funding for a server to house all of the models. DWR is in the process of migrating those models to new servers, and once complete, they will be available for anyone who requests access to those. In conclusion, DEQ, the Basin Planning Branch, continues to make progress on developing and implementing basin plans. It is a multi-section, multi-agency effort to put these plans together, and we appreciate everyone's help within DWR, within DEQ, and the regional offices in putting these plans together, as well as our stakeholders. Over the next 2 years, we'll be focusing on the Little Tennessee, Savannah, Hiwassee, Broad, and Catawba River basins. So those will be in the next biennial report, as well as continuing with the Cape Fear. That one is not listed here. So with that, we are requesting approval of the 2020 to 2022 biennial report on the progress on developing and implementing Basin-Wide Water Resources Plan. This is a joint report from the department, as well as the commission, and that is why we are bringing this report to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Raquet. We thank the staff for all they've accomplished this past year. We had a number of plans come before us in the calendar year so far and in 2021, and more to come in the months ahead. There is a schedule of when each basin or major sub-basin is scheduled to come to the EMC at different stages. That schedule is usually kept on the website if anybody needs directions on where to find that.
We haven't had that on the website for a while, but we did include a schedule in the report. And if we could add it to the website, it's just over the past 2 years, it has fluctuated and changed so much. We felt it was safer to include it in the report for now.
Okay.
And we could always add it to the website.
Well, since not everybody reviews this report, it might be good to have it at least accessible to the members so they know when to look for the basins that they're liaisoning to. So thank you very much.
Yes.
As she mentioned, this is a report that's due in November.
November 1st.
I think, to the legislature, the ERC. And since we're not meeting until November, we need to carry this to the full EMC to vote on it tomorrow as well. Since this is not a rulemaking, we do not have to apply the 30-day waiver for that request to go immediately to the EMC. So today, our need is to approve to carry it to the full EMC tomorrow for consideration and recommending approval. So I entertain a motion from any of our members for that action, or if you have questions along the way before we begin with a motion, I'll be glad to recognize you for that. Yes, Dr. Lazor.
I'm not on the committee, but may I ask a question?
Yes.
I know we have a new organization system. I can't find these slides anywhere in all the files and for the meeting today, and folks for tomorrow might want the slides. So
Yes,
I don't-
first of all, can you put your microphone a little bit closer? There you
Sorry, could you hear me though?
go. Yes, it is there.
Okay.
I'll be glad to show you after
Okay, because
the
I'm,
meeting. There's on the website, there's the agenda link, and then there's a meeting package link. And under the meeting package, there should be all of the files for today's meeting. And
okay, I have the files, but not the slides. So that's,
Oh, the
and then there's
PowerPoint.
the PowerPoint, right? And I just think for tomorrow, it's possible that people will want to be able to see the
Yeah.
slides. Maybe it's in tomorrow's though. Anyway.
Is it,
You can see the slides.
is it
Okay.
there?
Yes.
It's supposed to be there. So we'll help you look for it.
It's probably as a PDF instead of a PowerPoint. I think we uploaded them as a PDF instead of.
Any other comments or questions? Vice Chair Harris.
I'm prepared to make a motion whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Yes. Please go ahead.
Okay. Well, I move to approve the request to proceed to the full EMC with the 2020-2022 biennial report on the progress in developing and implementing Basin-Wide water resources management plans to the Environmental Review Commission. Where's the committee? Commission. ERC.
And that will be for tomorrow to the full EMC. So do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Duggan. Any further discussion about this plan? Or this report, excuse me. Commissioner McAdams.
You know, I'm one who, when I fear asking a dumb question, I go ahead and ask it anyway. We are the Environmental Management Commission. 3.5 years in now, I ask, what is the Environmental Review Commission?
That is a body created within the legislature.
Ah,
Would someone else like to give more detail about this?
Robin? Sorry, Chair Smith. The ERC, or the Environmental Review Commission, is a interim committee that manages a lot of the reports coming out of the department and oversight as it relates to environmental issues in the legislature. It's made up of House and Senate members, and then co-chairs from each of those bodies oversee the committee. Typically, they meet during the interims. There's not a whole lot of interims now, but they do provide oversight and also study issues that are brought to them from the legislature.
thank you. So our motion is that we, the committee, recommend to the Environmental Management Commission that the EMC, our EMC, send this on to the ERC
That's correct.
with our recommendation for approval, with the
Yes.
EMC's recommendation for approval.
Well, the EMC approves sending it. The ERC does not approve or
Oh, okay.
vote on it.
Okay,
It's
got it.
just a recommendation to send it to the ERC.
All right.
So, thank you.
It's a little more complicated than it probably should be.
Okay.
If there's no other discussion, I will take a show of hands. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. Vice Chair here. Okay. I see 3 hands up. All those opposed? There's no opposition. I'm assuming that Chair Smith's choosing not to vote. She has that option. And thank you very much. The motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Rickay. Our next action item is approval of the 2024 303D listing and delisting methodology. It's going to be presented by Cam McNutt, representing Ms. Beam, Pam Beam, who could not be with us today. He's with the Division of Water Resources and in the Modeling and Assessment branch.
Thanks. Pam,
Thank you.
Pam is
Welcome.
listening and watching, so.
Okay, great.
This will be a pretty quick presentation. Quick outline, we're going to talk about the role of the EMC in this process, some terminology reminders. A lot of you have already seen this terminology in the past. Updates to the 2024 methodology, which are minimal, and then a timeline for proceeding in 2024. The role of the Environmental Management Commission in this process, laid out in statute, requires the approval of the 303D listing and delisting methodology. That is the process that staff use to put water bodies and parameters onto the 303D list of impaired waters and also to remove them from that list. 303D list is a report that we submit to EPA every 2 years on April 1st. It is a list of water bodies and parameters that are not meeting water quality standards and require the development of a total maximum daily load or some other restoration plan for them to meet water quality standards. EPA does have final approval authority over the 303D list and those waters that are removed from the 303D list. And you saw in May when we presented that overview to you, those water bodies that were new to the 303D list and the ones that came off of the list. The delisting and listing methodology this is what the EMC approves of. It's a document that lays out in plain words for people to read how we make the decisions to put a water body and a parameter onto the 303 list, and also the same decision process to remove a water body from that. EPA, if they concur with our methodology, they do not approve the methodology, but if they concur with their methodology, it makes the actual approval process quite easy for them because they don't have to go through water body by water body to see if we've applied a process that meets their guidelines. We've been in concurrence with EPA now. I think this is our second cycle, so it's made things a lot smoother as far as going back and forth with EPA on this process. The integrated report it's not the one that Michelle was talking about. This is the integrated report that integrates two portions of the Clean Water Act, the 305B and the 303D list. The 305B report is encompassing of all assessments in the state, which is around 15,000 or so. The 303D list is the part that EPA approves and is about 1,200 or so water bodies on that list. Here's kind of a visual of that process. The Category 1 assessments are ones that are meeting criteria. Category 3 assessments are ones that are kind of between the two where we can't make a statistically confident decision. Category 4 assessments are not meeting criteria, but those are ones that we've already developed a TMDL or a management strategy, and that's ongoing. And then Category 5, those 1,200 or so water bodies are the 303D list, and those are the ones that we will need to develop some sort of restoration strategy on. This is what we'll be updating in the procedures document right now, the listing and delisting procedures. We'll be changing the data window from 2016 to 2020 to 2018 to 2020, and also the new data years, which is an important consideration we used in making decisions, to the more recent calendar years 2021 and 2022. And this is important, especially for our third-party data submitters, that we get this process done up several months ahead of when they need to submit their data, because they may have, if we make changes, they may have to change how they submit data or even collect data, and as well as DWR staff as well. The 5 different procedures that we use are numeric, which covers all of yours, about 85 parameters that we look at that have water quality standards: dissolved oxygen, pH, turbidity, chlorophyll A, a whole host of other parameters. We look at ecological integrity using benthos and fish community collections. We evaluate recreation using 2 different pathogen indicators. And shellfish harvesting, we use the marine fisheries shellfish sanitation growing area status to make those assessments. And for fish consumption, we use advice and advisories from Health and Human Services based on fish tissue data that are collected by DWR. You saw in May, we presented the comments on the 303D list, including ones on methodology. Those resulted in us having to make no changes in the current listing and delisting process. So no changes were made there. The only things that we did change were those dates that are pertinent. Our timeline for right now, we're here to hopefully move on to EMC approval tomorrow. The assessment process will really get underway starting in May, June of 2023, and that'll take about 4 or 5 months, and then we will go to public comment, which is required sometime in December, January time period, and then be able to submit our 303D portion methodologies integrated reports to EPA March 31st of 2024. Here is our assessment website, which you can get to when you get to the presentation on the EMC website. And this is the proposed actions: recommend approval to proceed to the September EMC for approval of the 2024 303D listing and delisting assessment methodology.
Thank you. Again, this is not a rulemaking action, so we do not have to have a waiver request and vote to move to the EMC tomorrow. Are there any questions for Mr. McNutt? I'll ask one question. It looks like it's biennial, but we did vote last year, so you may want to tell us why we're voting again just 1 year later.
Because we had the 2 cycles back to back with each other. We had 2020 approval was late. 2022 started, our 2020 assessment process was backing into the 2022 process. We were doing 2 at the same time. So we needed to kind of rapidly get an assessment method approved for 2022 so we could separate those. And then I would be able to actually spend 6 months not working on the 303D list for the first time in 10 years. So, yeah, we were pushing the limits of timing on those to try to get those things done, but we were able to do it. And a lot of that was because we had kind of taken care of a lot of the bumps and bruises that went through this process in 2014, 16, and 18.
So now we should be on course and probably will not hear another request for another 2 years.
That's the plan, yes.
Okay, great, great. Okay, thank
There,
you.
there is a case though, where if we have new water quality standards that are adopted,
Yeah.
then we will have to come to you with an assessment method on those. And it could be just as simple as adding them to the list of parameters that are assessed.
Okay,
I have a feeling some of them that may not be the case though.
okay,
So
good.
there's a chance we could have to come again because of
Alright.
that specific instance.
And as you say, with rules, if we have a rule change, of course, we will have the triennial review package on as scheduled in the coming 2 to 3 years too. And that work for that rule development also is reflected in the methodology and vice versa. So very good. Thank you. Any other questions? I welcome a motion on what action we want to take. With anyone interested in making a motion to approve this to carry as a recommendation for approval to the EMC tomorrow?
Chair, may I please make a motion for recommend approval to proceed to the September EMC for approval of the 2024 303D listing and delisting assessment methodology.
Thank you, Commissioner Duggan. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Second from Vice Chair Harris. Any further discussion? If not, if I may see a show of hands in favor of the motion. Record shows there are 3. Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thanks.
Our third action item is proposed high-quality waters reclassification and outstanding resource waters reclassification of 4 waters and 7 waters respectively in the Watauga River Basin. That's in Avery and Watauga counties in our state. And presenting is Adrian Weaver of the Division of Water Resources.
Good afternoon. I am here to ask the committee to approve a request for surface water reclassifications in order for DWR to proceed to the full EMC commission meeting in November 22 for their permission to ask them to send these reclassifications out to public notice and public hearing. A request for the reclassification of 4 waters to add the supplemental high-quality waters or HQW classification was submitted by DWR's Biological Assessment Branch. The HQW supplemental classification is intended to protect waters having excellent water quality, that is to say, water qualities higher than the minimum state water quality standards. Per 15A NCAC 02B.0224, the waters must meet the excellent water quality requirement based on biological data as well as physical and chemical information. In the same submittal, a request for a reclassification of 7 water bodies to add the supplemental outstanding resource waters or ORW classification was made. The ORW classification is intended to protect unique and special waters having excellent water quality that are of exceptional state or national ecological or recreational significance. The conditions a water body must meet in order to qualify for the ORW classification are stated in 15A NCAC 02B.0225. As I mentioned earlier, a water body must have excellent water quality based on biological, chemical, and/or physical information. In addition, it must exhibit one or more of the outstanding resource values that are listed here on the slide. And this is what makes them of exceptional recreational or ecological significance. The outstanding resource values include presence of outstanding fish and commercially important aquatic species, habitat, and fisheries, a high level of water-based recreational use or the potential for it. For example, public mountain water, trout waters designation by the Wildlife Resources Commission, special designations as wild and scenic rivers or a wildlife refuge, or they can be a component of a federal or state park or forest. And last but not least, they could be special areas of ecological and scientific significance, for instance, like habitat for rare and endangered species. Here is a map that shows the locations of the HQW, ORW proposed reclassifications for 11 water bodies in Avery County and Watauga County in the Watauga River Basin. The 4 streams proposed for the HQW reclassification are Little Beaver Creek Dam, West Fork Root Creek, Stone Mountain Branch, and Crab Orchard Creek, excuse me. The remaining 7 streams on the map, and I hope I get them all, Green Ridge Branch, Harrison Branch, Dutch Creek, Shawnee Creek, Lowell Creek, and South Fork Ellison Branch are proposed for the ORW reclassification. The watersheds of these streams are in rural and are scattered throughout Watauga County, except for portions of Green Ridge Branch and Shawnee Creek, which are found in Avery County. A portion of the Dutch Creek watershed is within the town of Sun Devils, one of the 6 municipalities in the river basin. The drainage area of the 11 water bodies ranges in size from approximately 200 acres for the Green Ridge Branch to about 4,600 acres for Lowell Creek. In addition, approximately 30 miles of named streams are involved in the HQW ORW reclassification request. So this table shows the current classification, the bioclassification rating, and the outstanding resource value identified for each of the streams, 7 streams to be reclassified as ORW. These streams currently carry the classification Class C, Class B trout, and Class C trout. All of the streams meet the ORW excellent water quality criterion based on the excellent bioclassifications for the benthic macroinvertebrate data collected from these streams by DWR in 2020. In addition, 2018 and 2020 rare aquatic species data from the North Carolina Natural Heritage Program, public mountain trout waters designations by the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission, and state and national park lands are in the watersheds, and this qualifies them to meet, this demonstrates that they meet the ORW exceptional recreational and ecological significance requirement. The table here shows some of the same information that I went over with you in the previous slide. Just like for the waters proposed for an ORW reclassification, the excellent bioclassification ratings for these waters listed here meet the HQW or the HQW excellent water quality requirement. And also, this is based on also the benthos data from the 2020 DWR analysis. Currently, these streams carry the classification of either Class C or Class C trout. Before you is a table comparing the current and proposed requirements in the watersheds associated with the waters proposed for reclassification. The existing requirements are shown in tables 1 and 2, or in rows 1 and 2, excuse me, and the proposed requirements are shown in rows 3 and 4. If reclassified, regulations that affect new development and NCDO projects would apply in these watersheds. Furthermore, new and expanded wastewater discharges would need to meet additional treatment requirements in the proposed HQW waters. And no or new expanding wastewater discharges would be allowed in the ORW watersheds. In the areas to be reclassified, there are no known proposed developments, nor are there any existing discharges or no plans for new discharges that would be impacted by this reclassification proposal. This is in accordance with local government and Asheville Regional Office and Central Office staffs. We have contacted them and they have told us this. NCDO staff have determined that there are no proposed DOT projects that would be impacted by the proposal as well. Therefore, no fiscal impact is anticipated on development, existing or new discharges, or DOT projects. And we have received local support for this reclassification proposal, and you can see them, who we received that support from, and we appreciate that. So here is an estimated timeline that highlights the steps moving forward regarding this reclassification proposal. We do expect to get the regulatory impact analysis on the reclassification proposal approved by the OSBM in October and not September as we have anticipated, because there's some things that we still need to do, work on that RIA. So we are here today, and we are hoping that this committee would approve moving these reclassifications forward to the EMC, and if they do, we will come to the EMC in November 22. And then we will, at that time, we'll ask the EMC to approve taking them out to public notice. If that should happen, we will have a hearing sometime either in January or February of 2023. And then we'll come back to the EMC and they will vote on the proposal in July 2023. And if the EMC approves to reclassify these waters, we will go to the RRC in August of 2023. The anticipated effective date for the reclassifications is September 1st, 2023. And now I'd like to, before I tell you what the recommendation is, I would like to express thanks to the division's biological assessment branch, the classification and standards branch, as well as the Basin-Wide planning branch, who had prepared such a beautiful map for me. And also I'd like to thank the North Carolina National Heritage Program, as well as the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. They have all contributed to this effort, so I would like to thank them. And so here before you is our recommendation for you to take action on, and it is that the water quality, we request that the Water Quality Committee approve to proceed to the EMC with the proposed reclassifications. They are listed here. Proposed HQW reclassifications for Little Beaver Creek, West Fork Root Creek, Stone Mountain Branch, and Crab Orchard Creek. And we also request that the committee approve the ORW reclassifications for many waters, including Greenridge Branch, Harrison Branch, Upper Laurel Fork, Dutch Creek, South Fork Ellison Branch, Laurel Creek, and Shawnee Haw Creek. And so that is my presentation. Thank you. I will entertain any questions that you may have.
Thank you. I was reminded listening to the Air Quality Committee that since the RIA is not approved by OSBM yet, will the motion need to be contingent upon that approval to go to the EMC in November, or council? What did you recommend?
In the last committee meeting, the committee made, the air quality committee made the same motion that you bring it forward with the RIA.
Okay, thank you. So, given that, if anyone would like to ask some questions, now's a great time to do that, and you can be thinking about a motion along the way. Commissioner McAdams.
I have just one very brief question of Ms. Weaver. This is an excellent and upbeat, almost joyous presentation to have these outstanding resource waters in our state and to protect them. Just interested, has there been any local or stakeholder pushback at all as to these designations, these proposed designations?
I have not heard any.
Okay, sir. I was expecting that's the answer. Just wanted to know. Thank you.
Commissioner Duggan.
That was my question.
Okay.
But we'll see if we get to the hearing, we'll see if there's any pushback, but right now have not heard anything. Everything's been positive.
It is very encouraging, isn't it?
It is.
Sure.
Well, Madam Chair, I'm eager to make a motion.
Thank you, Commissioner McAdams.
I move that we approve these proposed
11.
Yes, there are 11.
okay, these 11 proposed, what's the term? Reclassifications. To proceed to the Environmental Management Commission with the proposed, reclassification request for the following waters, the 4 and the 7 that are listed here for respectively the high quality water and the outstanding resource waters of the state.
And that is to go to public notice after the EMC decides and upon receipt of OSBM approval of the regulatory impact analysis?
If that needs to be part of the motion, absolutely, yes.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Duggan. Thank you. Mr. Duggan. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Record show that we have 3 hands up. Any opposition? 0. Thank you. The motion carries. Our 4th action item is a request approval to proceed to the EMC with proposed revisions to the Laboratory Certification Rule 15A NCAC 02H.0804 to add additional parameters, which I think we'll hear which ones those are. I was going to name them, but I'll wait for the suspense, And it's being presented by Todd Crawford with the Division of Water Resources, Wastewater and Groundwater Lab Certification Branch. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time and to be here to present this. We are here to request approval to proceed to the EMC to revise Rule 15A NCAC 02H.0804, specifically 0804D, which is the organics parameter section of the rule. Basically, 0804D lists the organic parameters that are available for certification by the Wastewater Groundwater Laboratory Certification Branch. The language specifically states each of the organic parameters listed in the paragraph shall be considered certifiable parameter. 1 or more parameter methods shall be listed with the laboratory certified parameters. Analytical methods shall be determined from the sources listed in 0805A1 of that section. So we're requesting to add the 2 parameters. Parameter methods would be certified underneath those parameters. The cost for adding any organic parameter method is $85 as set forth in 0806. Parameter method additions by laboratories are optional and determined by their ability to perform the analysis and their desire to be able to produce certified data for regulatory purposes. So the first parameter that we're requesting is PFAS. per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, better known as PFAS, which is a great concern for North Carolina regulators, as well as the public at large. DEQ anticipates requiring many permitted facilities to test for this class of compounds in the near future. Some are already beginning to look for those. Also, permits require that the analyses be performed by certified laboratories, which means they must be certified by the Wastewater Groundwater Laboratory Certification Branch. EPA Method 1633 is the method for PFAS compounds. It is currently in draft form on EPA's website. Lists 40 PFAS target analytes, and we anticipate that method being approved and promulgated in the Federal Register within the year. Our branch currently does not have the authority to certify for the parameter known as PFAS, so this parameter would need to be added to 0804D. The second parameter of concern is organic fluorine. Analysis of organic fluorine provides an aggregate measurement of chemical substances that contain carbon-fluorine bonds, which is the primary bond in the PFAS compounds. So it's like a complementary parameter. So it's useful for understanding the presence and forms of PFAS in wastewater when used in conjunction with the methods that target the individual compounds, like the 1633 for the PFAS. This analysis is also useful for confirming the need for remediation in sites where PFAS contamination may be suspected. Used as a screening tool to help determine that. The branch is currently not certified to, or not authorized to certify for the parameter of organic fluorine. So we would need to add that parameter to the 804D. Whoop. Too fast. Here, this slide is what 804D currently shows. This is the list of the organic parameters that we are currently authorized to certify for, with the two that we are requesting added in red. That is how the rule would look. So in summary, PFAS is a great concern, of course, to regulators and the public at large. The organic fluorine analysis is a useful screening tool and complementary analysis for the PFAS analysis. Certification branch is currently unable to certify methods that fall under those parameters. So these parameters must be added to 804D to allow the certification branch to certify municipal, industrial, commercial, and other laboratories to use approved methods to measure these analytes associated with these parameters and report the results as regulatory data. So in conclusion, the Division of Water Resources is requesting that the Water Quality Committee approve to proceed to the EMC with proposed revisions to the rule 804D to include PFAS and organic fluorine. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Vice Chair Harris.
To be able to proceed to the hearing and the process.
Yes.
I'm sorry. So just to make sure I understand, this is just to approve to proceed to the EMC so we can move forward with public hearings, that type of thing.
Right.
And it would be at the November meeting.
The vote will be tomorrow.
Okay.
It is at the proposal stage, you're right.
Okay.
And it is tomorrow that you're requesting it, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Because of the urgency of this.
Yes.
This and the anticipated availability of the test methods.
Yes.
So. Any other questions? Again, in this case, this is a rulemaking, and it requires a motion for a 30-day waiver to take it to the EMC tomorrow. So the motion needs to include not only recommending the EMC propose this rule, but also recommending that the EMC approve the 30-day waiver.
Madam Chair, is that two motions?
I'll ask our counsel. He prefers two motions.
Sorry.
Do we need a
For
motion?
today or?
Yes, for today.
You can.
Tomorrow
include it-
would be a two-step process.
Correct. You can include in this motion that you would recommend both that the commission waive its 30-day bylaw provision and approve for public notice the proposed rules. So this can be one motion.
That answers my question.
Thank you. Yes. So I welcome a motion from any of the committee members. Don't be shy.
Madam Chair, I'll try. Usually I try to write these out as
Yeah.
I'm thinking them through, but so we can combine these. So I move to approve to the EMC with the proposed revisions to the Rule 15A NCAC 02H0804 to include parameters PFAS and organic fluorine for public notice and recommend exercising the 30-day waiver.
Thank you. Do I hear a second? Thank you, Mr. Duggan. Any further discussion about this? If not, may I see a show of hands, all in favor of the motion? Records show that we have 3 hands raised. Any opposition? 0. Motion carries. Thank you very much. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Our 5th and final action item is request approval to proceed to the EMC with Falls Lake Stage 1 Existing Development Individual and Joint Compliance Programs. Presenting is John Heisman, Division of Water Resources, Non-Point Source Planning Branch.
Good afternoon, Chairman Deerhake, members of the committee. Again, I'm John Heisman. I work for the Division of Water Resources, the Non-Point Source Planning Branch. In my role, I primarily focus on implementation of the Falls Lake Nutrient Management Strategy. And as was mentioned, I'm here today before you to request permission to go to the full EMC for approval of the Falls Lake Stage 1 Existing Development Individual and Joint Compliance Programs. I know many of you have heard me talk about Falls Lake before, but I always like to kind of just start out with just a little bit of background about Falls Lake and the nutrient management strategy, just to orient you. So this is a map of the Falls Lake watershed. It's a 770 square mile watershed. We're located in the upper Neuse River Basin. So there's 6 counties and 8 municipalities. We're talking about the areas of Durham County, Franklin, Granville, Orange, Person, and Wake, and the 6 municipalities that are listed here. I have asterisks next to each of the municipalities and counties that are members of the Upper Neuse River Basin Association, the UNRBA. And this watershed is basically about 60% forested, 13% developed land, and about 10% agriculture, which is predominantly pasture agriculture in the Falls watershed. You'll recall that back in 2010, 2011, 2009, we worked with stakeholders to develop a nutrient management strategy comprised of rules calling for reductions from both point and non-point sources to reduce phosphorus and nitrogen loading to the lake in order to improve water quality for the lake and meet the chlorophyll A standard in the lake. Those rules were adopted by the EMC back in 2011 and are currently being implemented. So as part of that management strategy, what I'm focusing on today is just the existing development rule that makes up part of the Falls Lake strategy. And this slide covers the stage 1 requirements for Falls Lake for existing development. The existing development requirements are basically broken into 2 stages, but the focus today is on stage 1 because stage 2 will be changed during the rules readoption process that's coming in a few years. The goal of stage 1 is to offset the nutrient loading from developed lands between 2006 and 2012. The significance of those dates is 2006 is the baseline period for Falls Lake that we measure reductions against under the strategy. 2012 was when all of the local governments in the Falls Watershed adopted and implemented their new development stormwater requirements. So new development was meeting export targets in 2012 on. So 2006 to 2012 represents an interim period of 6 years. And the goal of stage one is to offset the nutrient loading from that development that happened in that 6-year time period. Under the rules, DWR is charged with developing a model program that basically serves as a guide to the local governments on how they can develop and implement their local programs to achieve those reductions that they're required under the rule. Back in 2013, I actually presented to the EMC a draft model program, but at the time, we asked for that model program back so the division could continue to work with stakeholders and collaborate with them to essentially expand the toolbox of all the different types of measures that they could implement and provide additional flexibility on things they could do in order to achieve the reductions that they were called for. During that time, we worked on expanding the toolbox. We also worked with the local governments to develop preliminary jurisdictional loads. That's the loads that they would be required to offset. We also worked on making additional revisions to the model and continue to work with the UNRBA over the past 4 years since 2018 and developing this, something I'll speak about in a little bit more detail in a few minutes, this alternative implementation option for this rule. You also recall that there was legislation passed in 2016 and 2018 that modified the schedule for stage one. That was that legislation that formed the UNC Collaboratory, charging them to develop a study for Jordan Lake and a study for Falls Lake. The Falls Lake study will be completed at the end of 2023. And basically, the legislation extends the implementation of the Falls Lake Stage 1 rules until the rules are readopted following that study by the collaboratory and also the ongoing re-examination or remodeling that the UNRBA is working on that it's also planned to be done by 2023. So, assuming that the models are done in 2023 and the collaboratory study is done in 2023, we're anticipating a readoption of the Falls Lake rules, probably in that time frame about 2026. Start with the EMC and the rulemaking process in 2024, and it usually takes about 2 years to get through that process. More recent history, there was actually a joint presentation with myself, DWR, and Forrest Westphal, the director of the Upper Neuse River Basin Association, who I understand is on the line today listening. We did a joint presentation to water quality back in September 2020, just to give an information update on the development of that existing development model program. And at that time, we introduced the concepts of that interim alternative implementation approach that the UNRBA was working on, that IAIA. The model program was finalized and brought to the EMC back in January of 2021 and approved. That model program recognizes 2 compliance options that local governments can follow under the rules, both an individual or a joint approach. And in that model program, we reference that UNRBA proposal, again, that we call it the IAIA, the Interim Alternative Implementation Approach. Under the rules and under the model program, once the model program was approved, local governments had 6 months to submit and begin implementation of their either local or joint programs that would have taken place back in July 2021. And again, just to reiterate, like the way it's set up now is we have 2 options for implementation. Option 1 is that more traditional approach laid out where a local government develops a local program for them where they have a jurisdictional load and lay out implementation plans for doing practices in their jurisdiction to offset that load. Option 2 is this joint compliance approach where the jurisdictions work together to collectively achieve the reductions as a group. We had one local government choose option 1, that's Roxborough, who just happens to be the one of the 14 local governments that's not part of the UNRBA. And then the 13 local governments that are part of the UNRBA all opted for that joint IAIA approach. So I just want to go over the key elements of those 2 different approaches. Again, we had one doing this option 1. So basically what they do in their local program and what they submitted was they calculate their stage 1 load reduction needs, what we refer to as that jurisdictional load of what they need to offset from that 2006 to 2012 time period. They also include in their program like a measures opportunity assessment. That's where they evaluate what type of opportunities they have to go out and implement either structural, engineered, or programmatic practices to achieve the reductions they need. and evaluate the potential of those practices. And then they lay out their implementation plan about, the type of practices they plan to implement, the different types of lands that they will be affecting, and how they're prioritizing those practices and the expected magnitude of the reductions in duration of those practices. And of course, there's an annual reporting component in there where they document their implementation of their plan. So that's option one, the individual plan. Option two is that joint compliance approach. And again, this is an option that they can voluntarily opt into where the parties merge the reductions and meet things collectively. In this case, we're talking about both merging the reduction needs of the municipalities and the counties. And the way the Falls Lake rules are set up, it not only allows the counties and municipalities to work together, it allows you to merge the reduction needs of both the existing development requirements and the wastewater requirements. So you can merge all of that together and collectively meet those reductions together. That's what the UNRBA's interim alternative implementation approach is proposing. Again, it combines the wastewater plants with the existing development. And just to remind you, when I provided that 2021 Falls Lake implementation report to the EMC, there's 3 wastewater plants, major wastewater plants in the Falls Lake watershed. There's North Durham, Hillsborough, and Sigwassa, and they're all doing a very good job of meeting their stage 1 reduction goals, where have reduced their nitrogen and phosphorus by 57% for nitrogen and 73% for phosphorus. So they're actually exceeding their stage 1 goals for nitrogen by about 50,000 pounds and phosphorus by about 10,000 pounds. So they're doing a great job. And when you combine those reductions along with what the needs would be for the existing development, they're well under their stage 1 load reduction needs. But what the IAIA does is it ensures that projects continue to be implemented that improve water quality in the basin. And it gets us away from pounds accounting, because as we're trying to calculate jurisdictional loads and working with the local governments, there was some disagreements about methods that we should use, what should be counted, and how to come up with those numbers. And also on the flip side, when we were looking at different practices that they could implement, there was a lot of debate about what should you get credit for and how many pounds should you get credit for that and how that should be calculated. So this kind of gets us away from arguing about those pounds, instead, guaranteeing implementation and continuing to improve water quality in the lake. And the IAI, by getting away from the pounds accounting, it provides additional flexibility of all the different types of practices that they can implement. And I'll go over those practices in a moment. But I do want to just reiterate one point: where they can track pounds, they will track pounds. It's just that this adds flexibility to implement things where we don't necessarily have pounds accounting established, but we know that these things do improve water quality in the lake. And the biggest part that's kind of different with this type of approach is the affected parties are committing to a fixed dollar amount invested in projects and programmatic measures each year. And I'll highlight that on the slide as well. And of course, there's a reporting component to track their implementation, both an individual report from local governments submitted to DWR and a joint report submitted from the UNRBA that kind of summarizes all the individual reports. And there's a few administrative things that are taken care of in the IAI that just kind of address things about the process for handling if somebody wants to leave that group, making sure that they give advance notice to DWR, and of course they would need to have a local program in place before they can leave that joint group, so there's no lag in implementation. So real quickly, I'm just going to highlight the Roxborough individual plan. They're the one local government that has the individual approach. They calculate their stage 1 reduction needs using the SNAP tool. That's the stormwater, nitrogen, and phosphorus accounting tool that we use for development. They have modest load reduction needs. Roxborough is only partially located in the Upper Falls watershed. Their overall population is about 8,000 people. They've lost population over the years. And between the 2006 and 2012 time period, they were hit pretty hard by the economic recession. And they actually only saw about 11 development projects and actually had 7 demolition projects that took away developed land. So overall, their annual needs are about 15 pounds of nitrogen reduced and 3 to 4 pounds of phosphorus. They did do a measures opportunity assessment back during their original inventory in 2013 and identified some limited options. And they went back and revisited it for the development of their implementation plan with a focus on, really being able to achieve these reductions through their street sweeping program that they started post baseline. But that would be their primary practice for getting these reductions. And they could also do things like improve their collection systems or potentially do a nutrient offset payment and restore buffers. Their existing stormwater fee program is used to fund these different practices, and so they did indicate in their local program that the street sweeping will be the primary practice they plan to implement. And they proposed on submitting their annual reports every October 31st to let us know how they're doing in their implementation progress. Under the UNRBA IAIA program, again, I just want to really stress that this program was developed through collaboration between UNRBA, the Division of Water Resources, and NGOs like American Rivers. That program does address the required elements from the model program for joint compliance. And really the guiding principles for that IAIA program is that demonstrates with the parties this continued commitment to cost-effective and equitable management of Falls Lake. We really think about this as an innovative approach here, and this could lay the foundation for innovative management approaches both in Falls Lake and perhaps be used as a pilot study to look back on for how we re-adopt the rules after the re-examination is done, or perhaps in other watersheds. So this is why it's called the interim. It's that first stage 1 5-year time period, and we'll see how well it does, but we do think this is a positive, innovative approach. It keeps implementation of water quality improvement practices going on while that re-examination, that remodeling is going on at Falls Lake, so implementation is not being paused. And again, it adds that flexibility by adding an expanded list of allowable practices by not just focusing on pounds accounting, but really focusing on things that improve water quality in the lake and not necessarily narrowing our search. And overall, it simplifies the approach because we're just looking at, tracking things initially, tracking pounds where they can, but having that annual funding commitments that they have to meet each year. There's program documentation is also addressed in the IAI, where they lay out the investment commitments for each participant. They provide that list of practices, and they outline different reporting procedures and provide some general implementation guidance and provisions to the local governments. This table is straight from the IAI, and it represents the minimum annual investment levels for each of the 13 local governments that are participating. The total sum comes to $1.5 million per year, and that's just the minimum investment commitment, and you can see the individual commitments for each local government. And the UNRBA developed these numbers cooperatively by looking at how they had their current fee structure set up for their organization and considered weighting things like how much of the drainage area does each local government have in the watershed, and whether they're pulling water from Falls Lake. And there were a few other factors that kind of distributed things appropriately across the local governments. And now I just want to reiterate that these numbers here are the minimums. A local government can use their money to do an individual practice within their jurisdiction, or they can work with other jurisdictions and pool money and do practices anywhere within the watershed. The money can count towards both the acquisition of land, the planning and designing of practices and programs, and the maintenance of that. And should they spend more in a given year, it can roll over into the next year's commitments. I won't read through this list, but this is included in the IAI with the expanded list of eligible practices that can count towards that annual commitment. And just to highlight, obviously all of the state-approved practices where we have established nutrient credits for our SCMs and retrofits, they're all part of it. Green infrastructure practices, things like disconnecting downspouts and having cisterns and rain gardens can count. Stream restoration and buffers. Again, the operation and maintenance counts towards this. Floodplain reconnection, things like land conservation in high priority areas. And greenways and parks that have a documented water quality benefit for that. So it really kind of, again, expands that universe of things they can do, all the things we have accounting for, and then a whole world of things that we know have a positive water quality benefit for the lake are all eligible for this. And then there's the availability of proposing additional activities to be eligible by just sending DWR notification and working with us on approval. In terms of administration and annual reporting for the IAIA, the UNRBA basically formed a compliance group committee, just a subset of their local governments that are participating in the IAIA. And that's their internal decision-making body that works on the implementation of that joint compliance approach. They're responsible for tracking and submitting that joint combined report to DWR each year, and they'll work on providing guidance to the individual IAI participants, because there's some big local governments in Falls, there's some small local governments, and UNRBA, obviously they pool resources and they work as an intermediary as if somebody's proposing a new practice and kind of help them with their submittal to us. Annual reports, the local governments will submit individual implementation reports to DWR annually every September 30th. And then there would be that compliance group committee would submit that joint report, collating all that information to a summary report by November 30th. The initial duration of this IAIA approach is July 1st, 2021, when they submitted it back in 2021, through 2026. That's like a 5-year interim period. And of course, there's the option for an extension of this should the rules readoption go beyond 2026. So we're just recapping the timeline and implementation steps moving forward. Back in July 2021, the local government submitted that local program from Roxborough and the joint program from the UNRBA. And under the rules, they submitted it and actually began implementing practices back then. I'm here before you today, September 2022, with those local and joint programs, asking for approval, go to the EMC for their approval. It's kind of a formality, but once approved, implementation of that fully approved program is supposed to begin by December 2022. Obviously, they're already implementing things. This is just kind of more of a formality if there's any changes along the way. And then just to kind of reiterate some of the other processes going on, there's this UNRBA reexamination that you've been hearing about with all the remodeling of Falls Lake. There's the UNC collaboratory study that's going on with Falls Lake. Results of all that's expected by the end of 2023. That session law calls on the EMC to begin the rules readoption process for Falls at the conclusion of that work in 2023, starting in 2024. And we anticipate that rules readoption process with all that information and engaging the stakeholders to go about 2 years. So sometime around 2026, 2027, we should have readopted the Falls Lake rules, and that would signify the end of stage 1 implementation. And we'd have a new set of requirements, updated requirements in the rules. So in conclusion, I just again wanted to recognize and thank the UNRBA and the local governments and American Rivers for all the collaboration on the IAI. I do think that this represents a collaborative, innovative approach that will continue positive water quality practices in the Falls Lake watershed. And with that, I just want to reiterate our requested action today, where I'm basically asking the committee for permission to proceed to the full EMC tomorrow for approval of both the IAI approach and the City of Roxborough's local program for the stage 1 existing development requirements in Falls Lake. Thanks. Happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Vice Chair Harris.
Yeah, this is just an informational kind of question for me. I was looking through these eligible activities, and I saw the green infrastructure and the best management practices. Are these like according to standards somewhere? How do you determine that a BMP is eligible?
With that, I mean, we're typically thinking about things that we have some sort of documentation on water quality, water quantity, benefit. I mean, some of the basic examples are things like rain gardens and cisterns and things like that of that nature. I think if anything was proposed that we had questions about, we would probably ask the proposing local government to submit any research or any supporting literature about that. Like, for example, I'm kind of jumping, but like that hydrilla removal, the second to the last, that was actually proposed to us as we were working on this document with the UNRBA. Orange County reached out and they said, hey, we have this program that we're doing that we're planning to invest a lot of money in the future, and we think there's positive water quality impacts. And they submitted information to us, and we talked to division staff who were involved in that program and decided, this makes a lot of sense to include this. So, I mean, I think there's a general understanding of some basic green infrastructure practices that we all agree on. And then there's the potential for them to submit anything innovative or new. We would probably just want to take a look at any available research to be confident that there's a positive water quality or quantity benefit.
The EPA's National Stormwater Calculator does include now information on calculating performance of green infrastructure technology and designs. So, any other questions? Chair welcomes a motion on proceeding. The request is to carry it to the EMC tomorrow. Again, this is a program. It is not a rulemaking, so it does not require that we honor the bylaw for the 30-day waiver request. So I welcome a motion, and we thank the staff for their continued hard work on this, as well as all of the stakeholders who invested countless hours.
Madam Chairman, if I may.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, hopefully I get this right. I move to approve request to proceed to the full EMC for approval of the Upper Neuse River Basin Association's interim alternative implementation approach and City of Roxborough's individual local program for implementing the Falls Lake Stage 1 existing development requirements.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
I second.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. McAdams, Commissioner McAdams, WAC Chair McAdams. We have lots of chairs in this commission. Okay. Any further discussion? If not, I'll take a show of hands. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Record shows there are 3 hands voting yes. Any opposition? 0. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank
We
you.
will listen to this tomorrow. That completes our action items. Our next topic is an information item, which comes out of our EMC agenda in July. It is the review of the revised local programs for Neuse and Tar Pamlico new development stormwater implementation. Presenting is Trish Darconti with the Division of Water Resources Non-Point Source Planning Branch. And this is coming to us as a result of what I understand was an extended discussion at the EMC in July, where members decided that they would like to go back and consider a little bit more of the content of the plans that were presented at that time for the first set that the Water Quality Committee approved in May to take to the EMC. Since that time in July, the day before the EMC meeting, the Water Quality Committee approved a second set of local programs because of the review that took place over the past 2 months. The staff is coming to us with a recommendation for the combination of those 2 sets of local programs. Vice Chair Harris or Chair Smith, would you like to add any comments based on the July discussion, since I was not at that meeting? No? Okay. Thank you. Are you ready, Ms. Darconti?
I think so.
And I will say there is no action, as I said, this is information item. The decision is before the EMC as it was in July. So our role today is to listen, ask any questions, and if we have any requests or suggestions or opinions we'd like to carry to the EMC tomorrow, I'll be glad to report those to the commission.
Hi, I'm Trish Darconti with Non-Point Source Planning, and I'm here to present to you the presentation that we're going to be bringing to the EMC tomorrow. And this is a supplemental review that we've done of the local programs for the Neuse and the Tar Pamlico new development stormwater rules that we brought to you in May and in July. How does this work? Let's see. So to give some background, in May, we brought the first 12 of what we call cohort 1 local programs. And the cohort 1 is the ones that are already implementing either the new or the TARPAN programs. In July, we brought the next 7 to the Water Quality Committee, and we advanced the first 12 to the EMC. At that time, we got comments from the North Carolina Home Builders Association regarding General Statutes 143 to 14.7, which is about stormwater management and about development, new development, redevelopment, existing development, and so forth. At that time, the EMC requested that DEQ review these local programs in light of the comments from the Home Builders Association and to present the findings to the Water Quality Committee and EMC in September. So the Home Builders Association letter stated that 12 of the draft ordinances didn't comply with the statute, A1 and B3 specifically. And A1 defines development, excludes existing, which is an important concept, built upon area from the density calculations. Project density is an important concept in whether you're applying stormwater regulations or not, and is used in the new TARPAN stormwater rules. And A1 also bars requiring additional stormwater treatment for existing development. It also defines a concept of redevelopment, which in this rule means no net increase in BUA upon development, which is an important concept. As we've been working with local governments, this is commonly understood to mean any kind of development activity where there's already development activity. And this makes it very clear that it is a net increase of 0 specifically. And then B3, that's the other part. It reiterates A1 with greater specificity. It states that it applies regardless of the source of regulatory authority. And it calls for including these requirements in local ordinances. So what we did, well, previously we provided a model program which was approved by the EMC in March of 2021. And the rules were to, the rules require a model program that embodies the elements in items 3 through 5 of the new or the TARPAN rules. And those specifically relate to the applicability or exclusions of the rules that applies to additional implementation that you have to do. So we had extensive guidance that we had worked on with the local governments from April 2020 through March 2021 when we developed this. And then EMC approved the program in 2021. So what the rule requires then is that DEQ reviews the local programs for compliance with items 3 through 5 of the rules, and that the EMC approves those items. So in response to the comments that we received in July, we reviewed all 19 of the local ordinances that we have presented to you so far, and their program plans for compliance with 143-214.7, including how development, existing development, and redevelopment are defined, whether the existing development time frame is properly identified. And this is not specified in statute. It had to be specified in stormwater rules, specifically O2H 1002, where they defined existing development and existing BUA relative to the relevant state or local stormwater that is being implemented. So that was an important thing, because what that means is that there's an implementation date that is used to define when existing development or existing BUA, how that is determined. And For local governments, that is going to be for the new use in the Tar-Pamlico rules. That's going to be their date of implementation when they adopt their ordinance and they adopt their local program. Some of them, most of them would use a much more generalized approach to describing, according, as of the date of this ordinance. But some of them had improperly identified the date. And then what we also looked at is whether existing development and redevelopment were specifically excluded from the new Tar-Pamlico stormwater requirements. That's actually in the list of exclusions for the two rules. We want to make sure that it's explicit. So our review results, what we found is 13 of them we would like to recommend to the EMC for approval. And this first group of cohort 1, so the first group is the ones that we brought to the Water Quality Committee in May and to EMC in July. I'm not going to name them, but the list is right there. And then the second set is the ones that we had brought to the Water Quality Committee in July. And then we would like to recommend that there are 6 of them that we return and request some revisions. And I'd like to point out these revisions are small. They're fine details. We don't think that these are serious problems with their ordinances, but we think that there are refinements that are necessary in some cases, very obviously so. For instance, incorrect dates or simply insufficient definitions of existing development for it to be clear what is going on. And that, I say, see attachment, it should be attachment. In this case, it's not named A1, and we don't have the right attachment name in here. But we have the list. And the requested action we're going to be bringing to the EMC is that the EMC approve this set of 13. We'd like to point out that it's 13 and not 12. There had previously been, I think, an assumption that Orange County was not included because they don't have to adopt an ordinance. They don't adopt an ordinance because all of their stormwater requirements are set up in the Falls rules. But the NUSE rules also do require additional things for them to do, including the reporting, illicit discharge, and public ed that are not part of Falls rules. And then in what we're calling attachment B, we have a set of 6 for which we are asking the EMC require revisions, and the revisions are specified in that attachment.
And may I just say, the attachment that we have for the Water Quality Committee agenda is not the most current explanation of changes. The current version is on the EMC. They're all okay except for one. There was one that was updated on the EMC agenda page, but it didn't get captured on the water quality page.
Yeah, we've gone and renamed them so one says incorrect because it's the old file, and the correct file says correct at the end of it. And are there any questions?
So if you'll just back up again, so we'll be clear. Tomorrow we have a list of 13 that the EMC will consider approving after a second review was made by the division. And then there will be 6 that will be returned to the local programs and asking for some not major revisions, but necessary revisions to make those documents more complete, more accurate. They will be given an allotted amount of time that's outlined in the rulemaking. They have a specific amount of time that they can work on those and return them, and the division has a specific amount of time that it can look at those revisions before it comes back to the EMC with their recommendation. And let me also at this point take the opportunity to thank Mr. Chris Millis with the Home Builders Association for raising interest in these packages and for the time and effort that he put into providing explanations and discussing with the division and with Chair Smith and me about the need for clarification. So thank you, Mr. Millis. Any questions? If I might, may I ask, do I have the consensus of the members here today that when we report to the commission tomorrow, that there are no comments or requested changes to the package as is before the EMC tomorrow? You would like to reserve, Mr. Duncan? Okay. Okay, so we are not required to take a vote, but thank you for considering it overnight and being prepared for tomorrow. Thank you.
Thanks.
That ends our main agenda. A number of these items will be before the commission tomorrow. So we are well prepared as we go into tomorrow and well informed about what we'll be seeing. You will have a list of committee interests that I've put together over the past 2 years, and I don't have any adjustments, or if you have any adjustments or any additions you'd like to make to that, please let me know. And now we'll turn to Director Richard Rogers for any closing comments he would like to make, reporting about activities over the past 2 months.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You have my director's report. Please read that. If y'all have questions about that or want me to expand on any of those items, I'll be glad to. I would like to highlight one of the part of the report, the first part where EPA is proposing to designate PFOA and PFAS as a hazardous substance under the CERCLA Superfund. I think this is a good thing for us. It's going to help us increase transparency around the releases of these harmful chemicals and help us in the state get a handle on those and move forward in better managing those emerging compounds. I also want to make note the division continues to operate understaffed. We're about 23% understaffed. I believe that equates to about 104 or 105 vacancies at this time. But I also want to acknowledge the great work that they continue to do. They continue to maintain pace that they need to on their programmatic duties and also take on additional duties as these emerging compounds come at us hard and strong. And they're doing a great job, and it's much appreciated for their work there. Also, Chair Deerhake has asked me to update the committee on a recent newspaper article on White Oak Farms, which is a animal feed operation that was operating. There's an article in Tuesday's N&O, I believe, quite a long article related to this facility and some problems that it has. I will tell you that they are operating on an individual general permit for digesters. The staff had been out at the operation back in February, had done a site visit, just a compliance visit, and noticed some problems out there related to their digester, a leak in the cover that was said to be repaired. There was some evidence of foam, but none that appeared to be reaching any surface waters. There's corrective action taken, and we moved on from that site again. On Memorial Day, we were called back out to the facility. There was a request because of odor. At that time, there's a lot of foam on the ground. The operators have been taking some corrective action trying to manage that, but it was really overflowing the lagoon, obviously not operating properly or correctly. At that time, foam did reach surface waters. Our calculation is about 30,000 gallons of liquid actually got into the surface waters at that time. None of these are issued in both of these instances. We are still in the process of evaluating penalty and assessment for the second incident as we move forward. As I mentioned, White Farms does have an individual permit related to their operations. They are a digester facility that accepts outside waste. And one of the major problems that they were having, we believe at this time, was that they were accepting only outside waste and not mixing it with animal waste, which probably caused the foam to occur and the problems that ensued. So we're continuing to investigate that, and we'll be on that as we move forward. If there are any questions that I can answer, I'll be glad to do that.
Thank you. And I did ask Division Director Rogers if he could provide the actual regulations that these individual permits comply with to make sure that we're up to speed on those and are in a position where we know if the rules as they currently are written are appropriate to cover scenarios such as this. So thank you for that.
Yep, and we'll get those to you. Anybody else that wants them, let me know. Be glad to forward them on to you.
Any questions for Director Rogers? Chair Smith.
Quick question. Are there conditions on the permit that specifically the types of materials that can be put to that system?
Yes, there are, and I think the general notion is that no more than 49% of what's being processed could be outside waste, whereas 51% at a minimum has to be animal waste. So they were out of compliance as it relates to that, and hence I think the problem that they had as it relates to all the fats, grease, and those kinds of things with the gases creating the foam.
Thank you for that question. Is that only a permit condition or is that in the rule too?
I am not exactly sure. I think it's a permit condition, but I'm not positive on that. Michael, do you have any idea?
Good afternoon, Michael Pajatra, Deputy Director. My understanding is that in order to qualify for the animal permit, that it needs to be at least a 50% manure content. And that's the way that we're viewing the rules and the application of it for the individual permit.
So it's stated that way in the rule?
The rule discusses the use of a manure system and a lagoon for a manure. And so it's just a matter of if you're above 50%, then you qualify for that permit. It doesn't explicitly state it. It doesn't give a explicit, threshold percentage.
It does not.
Right.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Yes, Chairman Smith.
One follow-up then. So it sounds like that percentage is looking at what's required to actually qualify to be this system at all. This type of animal waste management system. Is that what you're essentially saying, that you're relying on the rule and the statute's definition of what?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, exactly. Yes, ma'am.
So it may be a worthwhile follow-up discussion at some point of what we know about what inadequate mix inputs should be for a system like this. Because if we're just relying on whether it is or isn't an animal waste management system, and that's the only guidance we have, it would be helpful to know a little bit more about the chemistry involved.
Yeah.
And I was not a science major.
Yeah. So, right. One of the things that we're requiring of of the owner of the farm is to do a root cause analysis as well. Hopefully that will shed some light on exactly why it happened and why in such a volume that it happened as well.
It really is a function of, as you pointed out, the type of material that's going in to augment the system, as well as the type of animal that's generating the waste, because dairy is going to differ from swine, et cetera. So you're right. There's this proper anaerobic digestion research out there that could certainly contribute a lot to making sure that the right combination of materials are there. And I'm speaking more as a novice. We have an expert here at the table with us, probably with Vice Chair Harris. I mean, I've done outreach on this before, but she's the scientist that's the expert.
I am definitely not the expert, they're out there, but as I remember that world and having to go to all the farms, I mean, they each had their plans, their nutrient management plans, and it laid out what could go in and what could come out. And I remember very specifically that we couldn't cross the materials going in, and this was way back when, so I'm dating myself on top of all of that. So I'm kind of surprised that this was tried, but it is an individual permit, so a lot of times they can do different things, as I remember it, but it had to be spelled out in that permit.
So one other note on the individual permits, there's only 2 other facilities that have that individual permit status. So and they are not had any violations.
Thank you. Well, thank you for taking time to explain that to us. It's always important for us to be up to date on what's happening and in the news. So, are there any comments from any of our members as we get ready to close this meeting? I see none. I thank everyone for their attendance, both online and in person today. And our next meeting will be November 9th, I believe. I think that's what I heard Air Quality Committee Chair announce for their meeting. It's in November. And we thank you for attending today and look forward to seeing those of you who can be present tomorrow at the full EMC meeting. Good day.
Civil Penalty Remissions Committee 1 is up next. 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 Remissions Committee 1 is up next.